Oh. Aaron, do you want to make it? Can I drive this when I present? No.
It would be making.
Oh. Gotcha.
I don't know. Megan. I don't
It's
know.
fine.
I don't know how to. It might be.
It's okay. Looks good too.
It's just, it's already there. Do we turn participants off?
Oh, yeah, there's like a few.
Well, we're fine. We're fine, I think. We're fine, we'll just go with it. Okay. All right, welcome back. Thank you, thank you. Okay. So, session 2, here we go, let's go next probably 2 slides. And one more. Okay. So looking at the agenda, just announcements, we'll talk about 508 and then update on school calendars. We'll do the Utrecht's basic training and then the Analytics Center of Excellence, some data literacy presentation that we'll be working on. So with that said, let's go for announcements. So first off, there's a new bill, it's called HB 508. I'm sure all of you read and memorized this bill or not. It's complicated. I gave it to my, I'm not putting it down, I gave it to my team while I was gone. Said, hey, read this, let's figure this out, and they all made it back. They came back and said, well, I don't get it. And they handed it back to me and said, this doesn't make any sense. But with that said, let's move. Let me just give you a couple just information notes. So last year, we were required to get emails of all the staff. That hasn't gone away. It will just recycle and we'll open that up again. So just let you know, this is an addition to, but that survey will be going out. So 508, what is it? Basically, it mandates the State Board of Education to conduct a comprehensive study of LEA data, practices, systems, and reporting. It is a 2-year study that is going to be done, but with 2 report deadlines that are in law, what we have to do. And the first one is September 15th, 2025. That's not far away. And so that's what we'll be talking about mostly. There's a secondary component, which will be September, I think it's 15th or 16th, whatever it says in law, but that's 2026. Basically, what's going to happen is the goal is to gather data and make recommendations for improvements, statutory changes, rule modifications, implementation timelines related to these systems. So again, I'm using legislative language, which they're saying, hey, you gotta look at all this stuff. And I'm turning to you guys and saying, hey, guess what, you need to help us with this. But it'll also be your superintendents, it could be your business administrators. It's gonna be expensive. So what will happen, 2 phases as we're trying to get this done. One, we've got the immediate now. We've got to get the information from you guys, and I'm trying to get this out to you before the end of this school year so we can compile it, start putting in reports so we can get it ready for September. At the same time, the board, State Board of Education, has to meet together and they have to form a committee which will be reviewing the study. So just be aware that these two things are going in parallel. And then as we transition from this first just data collection component and move into the deeper study, retention schedules, for example, when is it okay to basically expunge or delete or, whatever those definitions are, like the whole system of all data we'll be looking at. And it's a huge job, just letting you know. So next slide, if you don't like. All right, so what do we need for this first report? This will be coming to you via Qualtrics survey, but basically, what's your current expenditure on your data systems? I don't know what it is, so this will be going out to all of you. It's like, what are all these things costing? So licensing, hosting, technical support, staff training, data extraction, custom programming, system modification, so on and so forth. You're gonna have to figure out how much they cost. Maybe you're like, I already know. Great, some of you might be going, I have no idea, we're not that well either, but just letting you know is one, what is your system's cost? Well, we'll pick on Davis School District for example. Hey, you build your own system, so how much is that going to cost? Maybe you're like, I know the answer. Some of you are like, I buy mine, and I get it from Aspire, for example, and USB hosts it. And I have one person who just, runs it. You have to look at all those costs involved with it. Okay, Steph, go ahead, question.
Is this a per year cost or an initial cost? Because Davis was your example.
It's vague. That's the problem. How much is this cost? And it was like, nah, it's vague. It's a great question. It's not the initial year. What, as I was talking to my staff, and we're still working out the details, I think what we're gonna do is, what is your average annual cost, not the setup cost? I think is what we're going to be answering, because it asks for the annual cost, not the initial setup. Question?
Then two questions. One is just for the SIS, not for everything else, right?
No. No. So let me repeat the question for those online. Is this just for the SIS and nothing else? No. Okay, there's the answer.
Okay, so then nothing else. I mean, what all, we have dozens and hundreds of applications, and some of them we pay for, some of them are paid for by state, but legislatures who are paid for by UENs, I mean, there's all sorts of different,
Yes.
so what are we including?
Okay, so question is, okay, so my answer to this is not just the SIS, what are we including? And the answer is, we are still going through the law to try to figure out on round one, what needs to be included. Most of round one is the SIS. Most. When you have it memorized? Okay, no. Most of it is SIS. Round two will be other systems, but I have to go through that law basically very carefully, make sure we're capturing everything for that first report. Most is the SIS.
When do you decide what the rest of most is? Like, we have to report by September 15th. How long do you get to calculate?
All right, so you got till September 15th to report this. How are you gonna? Yeah, part of this again is this balancing game. So the board has not even met yet to put this committee together. I'm just letting you know. So there is a committee that has to be formed to help answer this. They don't exist yet. And then, but there's also these insane deadlines. So I will try to, as much as possible, limit the first round to just the SIS. But I still, like I'm saying, I have to go through that law and make sure we're not missing weird things that can creep out. And then, as we do the report, the legislatures would say, but, you missed this and this and this, and we don't want to be incompetent when we make the report. So just let you know, it's not done. We've started the process of putting together the questions and evaluating and checking and say, okay, this is for later, this is for now, this is now, this. Just letting you know, if you want to read the bill, go read the bill. My staff read the bill, threw it back at me like, doesn't make any sense. So I just sharing it with you. Okay, so that was that question. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Say committee, that's like a board committee, right? Like, so they take the entire board and they take, instead of these 5 people on the board, they're the committee, or is it, they're gonna be people outside of the board as well?
Okay, so there's some chatter. I don't have, I had it somewhere. I can get it. Don't worry. The committee is made up of, there's an LEA rep of like Wasatch Front Rural, I think. There's probably a parent thrown in there somewhere. I think,
I guess what I'm getting, are you looking for some of us to be on the committee? And
okay,
how do we find out if we want to volunteer, and if we do want to, then how will we volunteer?
great question. Who gets to be on the committee? Answer, I don't know. It's not my wheelhouse right now of responsibility. My wheelhouse of responsibility is this at the moment. Great question. Who gets to be on the committee? Do I want to be on there? How do I volunteer? So on and so forth. Board meetings next week. Hopefully I'll have some answers by the end of next week. There's other things in the world going on which are really fun and crazy. Question, Mark? Oh, question.
You know what the purpose, the end goal is of this?
What's the goal or end or purpose of this thing?
Is it still that we're still looking at a statewide SIS?
And then follow, are we still looking at a statewide SIS? Part of the answer is, what's the goal? The legislature, as a group, thought this was a good idea and they voted on it. It went through about 5 or 6 iterations. That's the goal. They ask questions. And they're like, is it about a single SIS? A component of it for the legislature is to understand the complexity. It's the legislature, not you guys, not LEAs. It's for them to understand the complexity of the data collection and the costs involved with it. Part of the question that has arisen is, should the state of Utah move to a single SIS? That's been not totally derailed, but mostly. Where lots of conversations have happened about that. This last legislative session, then some funding was made available for the SISs to get, basically some funding to get them up to, say, speed or resources, whatever. And again, we're not talking about that right now. There probably are questions inside of here about a single SIS though. That would be, give us your feedback. They want to hear from the LEAs on their, does that make sense? So it's in there a little bit on a single SIS. What's the purpose? Again, the purpose is for the legislature body to have what they wrote, what they think is the best understanding of how your systems work. It's kind of saying it's not a dumb bill. But by the way, it's a hard one to answer. Just, you know, it's like, what did all the LEAs think about this? What are they using? What's their cost? What's all the data giving? And we've shared with them, it's complicated because there's hundreds of systems and cost lots of money. Like, will tell us it all. And like, come to these meetings anyway. So we're going back and I'll come to you. Oh, okay.
When they have these vague things, they're gonna give vague answers from us. It's garbage in, garbage out, right? Like,
Question or statement is, if they're asking for vague garbage, then that's what they'll get. Is that helpful? I didn't write the bill. So we're trying to make sure that this makes as logical and useful sense as possible. And the reason why we're going through it, but I'm also sharing with you. When someone says jump and they write it in law, we jump. It's the reality. I'm sorry. It's just what it is. Is this a lot of work and extra time? Yeah. Was I planning on it? Well, this is going through legislation, yes. Frequency and costs of system modification. Again, you're like, what, on a year period, on a 5-year cycle? Again, we're thinking right now, what's your average annual estimate that you're dealing with? We're not talking about a system changeover. We're saying, generally, within your current system, what does this cost? Now, if you're in a brand new SIS this year, maybe you're like, I don't know what the annual is. I know what the startup cost is, and then maybe give that in, but things. Okay, capabilities and limitations. This has been asked before multiple times. We've sent out information, but they're asking for it again. Examples of statewide systems in other states. we've already done some work on this, we're not gonna be asking you guys that, I just put it in blue, so you're aware that that question is being asked, and we need to report back to the legislation about that. Basically, a total statewide spending on individual SIS systems, projected costs of a statewide system. What does that mean? These are things that we have to look at, potential savings, implementation challenges. This is where they really want to hear from LEAs and transition requirements. So this goes back to the single SIS saying, hey, if we change, see, Granite's not here. We just changed this last year. Granite here. I mean, that's something where you guys like, what does change do? Yeah. Write that information, share it with us, saying this is what, we just went through, I know a couple of you have transitioned fairly recently, maybe a year or two ago. Okay, and then the last one's recommendation for efficiency and cost effectiveness. Again, they're asking you for this information, for the state board then to compile it, put it in the report, make it available. So this will be coming next slide.
Well, I know who's on the advisory committee.
Sure, who's on the advisory committee?
Urban school, representatives from urban school districts, rural school districts, charter schools.
You gotta do it.
state board,
There we go.
Representatives from urban school districts, rural school districts, charter schools, the state board, the Department of that's it.
Okay. Question?
I do have a question about, like, we are in the process right now of integrate, like, pulling power station into the campus.
Mhm.
And, it's crazy, as anybody who has done this knows, but is this, even if this happened, it would be a ways down the road, right? Like, we're
What's
not gonna.
this?
A
A thing,
statewide SIS.
okay, so repeat the question, it's a statement saying, hey, we're right in the middle of the transition from one SIS vendor to another. And it's fun, there's all kinds of things going on. The question is, we're not talking about doing this right now, the answer is correct. This is fact-finding legislative, that's why it's a 2-year study. What would it take to actually do nothing? What would it take to do something? These are, it's information that they'd like to receive and study back.
Is some of this data being used kind of like in conjunction with what you talked about before, where it comes to like data accuracy at the LEA level and the burden on them to get data into the SIS system, or is this something that's like?
The question is this related to, for example, the audit that came out on accuracy and reliability information? It's related-ish, but the legislative didn't say do this study. Now, section 2 or the second phase may have some of those questions in there. I don't remember, I haven't been looking at that part of the bill really close, because it's like kicking that down past September. And when the committee is formed, so I don't know. Hey, that was fun. So be prepared for potential requests for data related to our current student information system. This could include breakdown details of your current expenditures, like I said, estimate of staff time spent on tasks. I mean, I'd recommend start putting, well, you can be like most people who are like, well, I'll wait until I get the survey and then I'll put it together. That works, but just let you know, this is coming. If you're the type of individual who likes to prepare in advance, I would start preparing. Anyway, information on frequency and costs of system modification you've undertaken, the insight into capabilities, limitations, and system. And on my question, or
Something to keep in mind, if this is due the beginning of September, this is coming over the summer.
okay, so Calista said, keep in mind, this is September, and then she said it's coming over the summer, and the actual answer is no, it's actually coming before the end of the school year. Sorry.
That's better.
Okay,
That's good news.
so this survey is going to come out May, hopefully with no errors. But I expect this to come out May, June, late May. I know,
That's,
that's year end.
Fill it out. What would you do?
And then the question is, how long do we have it up? That's not figured, we don't know yet what's the window. Cause it's not,
How long do you want?
one day, here you go, no.
I mean, how long do you-
So here's the question. How long do you want? And when should we expect it to be completed? And you're like, well, I don't even know what you want yet. I know. If I gave you like 3 weeks, at the end of the school year, you're like, yeah, I can do that too. Or if you're like, no way, no how. Stephen,
3 weeks at the end of the school year when we're trying to submit our state report.
I know.
And then after that, we're trying to start a new school. I mean, there's not a great time, so the longer you can make the time, better.
Okay, so here's the feedback I'm hearing. The longer the better. I understand that some of you are really, really busy and we totally get that. Totally get that. Would you want it to go past the end of the school year? Or should we just say, just get it done? With everything else you have to do? This is feedback. Oh, what do you want?
Don't know what the survey's asking for.
I know.
So, I mean, are we gonna,
And we
you know,
don't know
timing
what the
second,
survey-
three, times, like,
Yeah, I mean, like you say, time spent on specific SIS related tasks. What does, I mean, to some extent, there are people, their entire job is working in the SIS all day. Do you want, is that what you're wanting? Or
Yeah.
is it more?
The question was, there are certain people who work all day, every day long, work on the SIS. Is that what we're talking about for staff and department time? The answer is yes. Calculate that, this is what it takes.
And
So I'm going to pause, for example, this will go for, I'm picking on Davis again. How many people do you have on the SIS system to run that thing for an entire year? That's your cost of staff time.
so I guess what I meant though is like, if we have a school registrar, they're building class or, course masters and they're scheduling students there, and that's SIS related tasks.
Yeah.
I mean, some extent it's like, well, why do you care how much, they're gonna have to do that no matter what, like, that's just, it's not so much an SIS related task, it's a running the school task. The SIS is the tool they use to accomplish that.
Yes.
So are you wanting that, or are you wanting more, okay, how much am I spending keeping the SIS running, because it's two different things, but it's all,
I
does that
haven't.
make sense?
Yes, it does. So here, let me restate the question for those online. Hey, you have registers who work on this, they're working in the system on here. You have teachers who are working, who are touching the system. Well, what level are we talking about? Staff involvement. And the answer is, I don't know on the specifics.
And I guess part of the reason I'm asking the question is because those are the things you think about
Yeah.
when you're creating the questions.
Yeah, it is something, and Sharon again, it says, hey, make sure you think about this when you create questions, and the answer is absolutely we are. Because part of it is we're trying to, going back to one of my first question, what's the point? Again, we're trying to swirl that out and saying, what, are you trying to understand how much it costs to run a district, an LEA, a charter school? This is your general cost of the technology. Are we going to show a bigger number, or are we going to show a more constricted, this is just a specific task, and this is what it costs? I don't have the answer yet. Again, we're working through, the law is also vague, so, sorry. And then the committee will form and they might change, but that's kind of phase 2, they might amend, I don't know. All I know is I've got 2 deadlines, and the first one is like crazy fast. And everything else is going on. So, couple questions online.
What about hardware cost to provide our SIS?
Hardware costs for SIS are included.
And then what about teachers entering grades into a grade book?
What about teachers entering grades into the grade book, et cetera? That one probably will not be calculated. I think it shouldn't be calculated into it.
In the comment, this needs to be defined in detail.
It has to be, I understand. Then define what you mean. And thank you for this question, to be well. We will work on this. Maybe I'll use a couple of you as guinea pigs just to read through the survey before release and say any follow-up, clarifications you want after we review it. So, question?
Interesting last question for the survey is how many hours it took to fill out the.
Yeah, we'll try to make sure that
It'll be
we.
interesting to see the spread.
Yeah. How long did it take you to fill out the survey? Was your question here? Okay,
So are you sending them up, or are you sending them to the VAs?
question, who's getting this? Is this us, the data people, or the VAs? The answer is, right now, it's going to you. It's going to you no matter what.
Please don't have an idea of what comes.
If we don't, I'm not planning on going to the VAs right now, but again, we have to start. You're saying send us to the VAs, I don't want to do it.
We've all been either one, there's got.
You're, let me kind of respond to the answer is, there's gonna be some collaborative effort that has to go on, by the way, because we will let your superintendents and directors know. Definitely. We will let your VAs definitely know that this is coming, and they've probably already been exposed. Now, when we say exposed to this, when the bill book came out, there's not just one bill in there. There were, I don't remember, 100 something. There's a lot. This is just one of multiple, so they have to pay attention to. But this is just, again, coming back and shining a light on saying, and now we need information. So, yeah, it'll go. I'll be working with Scott Jones and saying, who needs to see this? Let's figure that out. It is definitely coming to you guys. And because we love you guys so much, we know you're very dependable. We'll probably be harassing you if you don't answer. You'll probably be the point of contact where it's like, hey, we gotta get this, and you make sure it's completed. Okay, any other one questions?
You're gonna give this to us like at the beginning of May then?
Begin, he said, will you get this in the beginning of May? Yeah, we're frantically working on it right now. I know beginning of May is like next week. It is. Dang it. We're working on it.
Because we lose a lot of our registrars over the summer. So
Yeah.
make sure that we can ask for it.
It might be the second week of May. Yeah, just like, yes, yeah. I'll just share with you, my first meeting, and some of you know, I was gone over to Japan for 3 weeks, and I gave my staff this assignment, and I'm not saying, I'm just saying, I gave it to them, and they read, and we went over and went, what? And they threw it back to me and said, what do we do? And like, okay, well, I got this dang deadline, we gotta move fast, so, just let you know. And we'll be working on it pretty quickly. So just mental note, we do want a few people to review and.
For
review
sure.
it
Yes, we do.
To make sure. Okay, any volunteers that want to do a quick preview before we send it out? Dave raised his hand, okay. Send an email to Nicole Clark, NICH. Oh, okay, she'll put it in the chat. And those who want the preview of the survey to help us out, those who raise their hands, say, please put me on that. Thank you. Anything else? And she's like, come on, move, next slide, please, I think we're done. Questions, oh, we already did that, next one. Okay, update school calendars, next slide. Something else, okay, so one, we will meet the staff. Elliot, staff list again this year.
Are you gonna get that from Qualtrics again?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Two, we need your calendars. This goes over for more of the PR side and for, lots of other people. This is, but just know that this will be coming as well. There's a calendar too in there. If you click on it and go out to all the information. Some of you have already been in or whoever you have designated to do that, that will be coming as well. Any questions on the calendar? Okay, next slide. That's just more information on where's this calendar, how you find it. Next slide. A deadline for calendar re-entry week. I haven't actually put one. We'll just say,
Get it done.
end of May, get done. We'll just say it's the end of May. Okay, and here's the form. You basically just go in there, you fill out the information. This will be in the slide deck. Okay, was that fast enough? Probably not. All right, basic UTEX training, good luck.
I believe we have David.
David, you're up. Okay, next slide.
There are no slides for me.
Yeah, I.
Oh.
I'm
Sorry. And do this and we're done. Okay. Thank you.
Everybody, I'm just going to, well, put it up on the screen. We're just gonna go over quickly some Tableau reports that are available for you to look at. And then also there's a
In
couple
case she's not ready, so.
we don't have that are on the data gateway yet, but are going to be. They're in the process of getting put up there. How many of you have looked at any of these reports here? Anybody? We'll just go down the list so you can just kind of get a general idea what it looks like. So let's look at the first one. The compare schools dashboard gives you the ability to choose your school and how you compare to the top 20 schools that are most like your school. You can see there's two options. You can see the percent that are proficient in the comparison, and then the MGP for the school. Pretty straightforward. Let's go to the next one. This is our updated student proficiency report. The old student proficiency report is still available. If you knew that it was there, well, it's still there. But yeah, it's behind the login. I'm sure we can show you how to get to that too. Okay, next one. Specifically for MGPs, follow the same pattern as the student proficiency, so if you understand that one, this one has the same filters and everything, so you can drill down and see by student demographic group. Okay. ACT, again, they're all pretty much gonna be similar. ACT is like the school proficiency. We're trying to standardize them as much as possible, make it easier to look at each one differently. Okay. This one isn't updated yet, but we're working to standardize this one as well. But it gives you distributions, shows demographics. You can drill down to the school, see how you're doing specifically on Southflyer Plus.
Online comments asking you to speak louder.
Oh, sorry. Let's go to the next one. This is the early college dashboard, which is percentage of your students that are taking concurrent enrollment. We have other ones that they're not up here on the data gateway that will also include a I guess it's the composite of AP, IB, and CE courses. Next one. The graduation rate. So here's just the overall state one. If you want to be able to drill down into your schools, we do have on our Tableau server, we do have one that is not masked and one that shows at school level. Next one. This is not a dashboard, so we can go next one. Going down. The question online looks like what if we find that the numbers on the screen are incorrect? You can email me, I can look into it. My email address is david.mackey@school.utah.gov. And then this is the Acadian dashboard, which has, if you go to the top real quick, you can see there are multiple dashboards within here. So you can see subscores, you can compare your LEA against other LEAs. You can also see movement from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, how your students did. And the same with Acadian's math. And WIDA. So this is another one that was recently published. You can see by each of the subscores how your school doing and how it compares to the state average. Next, go ahead and go back to the main one. Okay, I guess that works. We can go to. So this one is one that is for, you have to be logged into the data gateway. This isn't made by us, so this is by Yushi. They just publish it to our server, and we're now posting it. So you can go in and see your high school feedback report, and whoever can get access to that. It's I don't remember what the role is. It's graduation role. If you want to be able to see the Yushi report. Okay, let's go back. And down at the bottom, there's a new section currently called enrollment and membership. Right now, it just shows enrollment trends. There will be other dashboards within this, but right now it just shows the overall. There's going to be two versions of this, one that is masked, which is what you see here, and one that drills down all the way down, even if there's one student that you've got to go and see. There are two other additions that will be coming soon. One is about students that are youth in care, and then the other one is chronic absenteeism, which I believe we'll be talking about a little later.
There's one more too. That's finance. It's colored.
Okay.
So,
I don't think that's in Tableau.
no, it's a Power BI.
Okay, well, we're just talking about Tableau. We don't care about. Just kidding, right? All right, well, that's all I have. Who's up next?
Me, Riley, and Stephanie. Yeah.
Am I good to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Riley, and we're going to do our data gateway and UTREX overview, just general training. We've offered this every year, and it seems to be helpful for new staff, or maybe if you missed it in the past. We just go over some general training on how to navigate Data Gateway and utilize the like the reports that are available there. So I'll be focusing on the UTREX overview screen. Next slide, please. So the way you access UTREX overview screen is by logging into the Data Gateway, and you click on the UTREX tab, and then you click on UTREX overview, and you have to have the correct role assigned in Data Gateway to see the overview for your LEA. And so if you're not able to see it, either reach out to your admin to see if you need to have the correct permissions. And then, or you're not supposed to see it. Next slide. So this is what the overview screen will look like for your LEA. This is just an example. And so there's a few different boxes and timestamps on the screen that are super important and helpful. So I'm gonna, if we go to the next slide, it'll walk through what we have. So there's the submission and processing timestamps and status, and those let you know when or if your last submission got into UTREX. And that is a really important timestamp, because if it, for instance, says data not yet submitted or error submitted, like error, then you can't finalize your data when it comes to finalizing the three periods throughout the year. And so it's really important to pay attention to what is the timestamp? Is this the correct submission? Is this the one that I just submitted, or is this last night's? Does it say data not yet submitted? If it says that, then you can't submit it yet. If it says process, that's great. And then there's also the examine data file, and the way you access that is by clicking on the Excel icon next to the words, and it's a really helpful resource for reviewing the data, what got through to the data collection, and it also includes records with errors. And there's also the validation error reports, and those show which records have fatal errors or warnings. And then there's also the finalized data box, and that shows you when the data were finalized, and that's where you finalize during a finalization window. So about validation errors, next slide. There are fatal errors and there are warnings. So fatal errors will block the record from getting into UTREX, and that must be fixed in most cases. There are very few exceptions, but for the most part, they need to be fixed. There's also some warnings that turn fatal at a certain date, and it's often the last day of school, and they have to be fixed before that date or they'll go fatal. And those are the list of the fatal, or the warnings that turn fatal, and you can find that in the UTREX specification. And also most warnings will only ever be warnings, so they're there for flagging something that could be incorrect, and so you just need to double check the data for accuracy. And if the data are accurate, then you can ignore the warning. Unfortunately, you can't make it go away. It will just be there, but please utilize those warnings as a tool to help improve your data accuracy and quality. So there are two different levels of warnings and fatal errors. So level ones are warnings and errors that are occurring within your LEA. For example, a student who's a first through third grader, at the end of the school year, if they're missing a reading on grade level status and they've been enrolled for at least 20 days, you'll get a level 1 validation. Level 2 validations are warnings and errors that are being checked against something else. So that could be being checked against other LEA collections, against external APIs, against the SSID system, etc. In the past, our training has said that this is being checked against other LEAs, but we've recently clarified that it's actually just being checked against other systems. So for example, you could get a dual scram warning because one of your students has an active scram record in your LEA and another active scram record in a different LEA. And most recently, we have the new invalid address validations and invalid district of residence validations. Those are level 2s because those are being checked against the external API through the UGRC. Next slide. So the way you access these validations are by downloading the validation reports to see all fatal errors and validation warnings. The level 1 validations are on tabs corresponding to the record type. So it will say the validation number, like the error code or ID, and that corresponds to the record type. And level 2 validations are on the level 2 errors tab. And the first few columns will give you the validation error information. And if you scroll all the way to the right, you'll see other LEA information that's causing the fatal record to trigger on, or fatal error to trigger on your record if another LEA is involved. And something I recently discovered, I don't know if the UTREX team did this or I just have been like not paying attention for the last few years. On the UTREX overview screen, you can also click on level 2 validations, and it's like hyperlinked, and it will open up the you can see every single record or validation one by one, and it has the student information. So you don't necessarily have to download the validations file to see level 2 validations. You can see those right in UTREX, and it's sometimes helpful to see because it kind of looks like the student lookup screen, and so it's a little bit more like user-friendly, and it's not just like an Excel spreadsheet. So that's also a really helpful tool for looking at those validations. It's just for level 2 though, it's not for level 1. So there's also a way to look at, are your records valid? So on each tab in the examine data file, if you scroll all the way to the right, there's an is valid column, and that indicates if the record will get into UTREX. If there's a 1, it means that the record is valid and it passes level 1 validations. If it's a 0, it means that it's being blocked by a validation, fatal validation error on the record. And if there's a 2, that means it's being blocked by a fatal validation error on a higher level record. And so this is one thing to note. If there's a record that has a level 2 fatal error, it will still show up in the examine file as is valid. The way that the examine file is made and constructed is not set up to do a check with the level 2 validations. And so there's no way essentially to use the examine data file as a confirmation that like, oh, there's no level 2 fatals, this record says it's valid, but it only passes level 1 validations if you have that 1. And so that's just one thing to note, that when there's a level 2 fatal error, these records get blocked after the finalized submission process in December, October, and in year end. And that's a process that happens after you guys press finalize data, and then it's in the transfer of the data from UTREX to our databases. And so that's just one thing to keep a note of. And we're working on ensuring that all of the reports that you go to, not the examine file, but all the reports for each of those each of the submission periods throughout the year, if it's a student level report, we are working with the UTREX team to add a column that says, is there a level 2 validation? Some of them have that, and so that tells you, oh, there's a level 2 fatal error on this student. That means that after I finalize the data, the student actually is not going to exist in the database. And so we're working on making sure that all student level reports will have that column to let you know that there's a level 2 validation. What defines a higher level record? That will be, I think, next slide. Is a question. Okay, yes. Hierarchy of the records and validations. So UTREX records have a hierarchy. It's kind of like building blocks. The base blocks must get into UTREX for any other blocks to get in. So for example, if there's a district record that has a fatal, then all other records get blocked. If a school record has a fatal, then all student records are blocked. If a student record has a fatal, then all those other records are blocked. I1 incident records can block I2 incident association records. AC records can block AM records. ST records can block other transcript records. And then S2, S3, S4, and the new S5 records, those do not block any other records. So for example, an S2 record could be blocked by a fatal on the S2 record or on the S1 school or district record. All right, I will hand this off to Stephanie now.
Okay, hello everybody. In the next several slides, we're going to see how the examine data file downloaded. So if the examine data file, as Riley indicated in the earlier slides, this is used to check if student records or other data are correctly making into the UTREX system. So it will help you identify and troubleshoot errors in your data submission. So to download it, you can go to the UTREX overview and find the little file icon next to the examine data. If you click the little icon, it should initiate the download. Next slide, please. So here is a brief overview about the examine data file and how it relates to the UTRAX specs. The top screenshot shows you the typical tab names in the examine data file. And then the bottom screenshot shows you complete list of record types in the table of content of the UTRAX specs. So by cross-checking those two, you probably notice that they're generally aligned with each other. But there are some exceptions. One situation is if you find the record type showing up in the UTRAX specs, but not in the examine data file, that's probably meaning that your LEA didn't collect this data in that category. So for example, in this situation, incident data listed in the UTRAX specs, but it doesn't show in the examine data file tab. So this means you don't have this data available in your LEA. That's something you probably want to know. And the other exception is the student S1 record listed in the UTRAX specs is split into two tabs in the examine data file. One labeled as student and the other labeled as student list. So when you want to try to find that record, take a look at the two tabs. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is fun time. So we're gonna use the next 5 minutes to try to navigate to the examine data file and try to download it. If you still have several minutes left, you can open up the UTRAX specs to see how they align with each other. So the first step, I think, is get on the data gateway. Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry. Okay,
Your activity is failed.
I'm so sorry about it. I apologize. Okay, so, okay, so maybe we just move to the next slide, Calista.
Was anybody able to get to it?
Yeah, is there anybody have questions?
Yeah, it was available 30 minutes ago.
Okay,
Well, that's a lesson learned.
yeah, so, yeah, you guys please try it out offline.
Gradually throughout the next.
Yeah.
So for your next slides, if you would move to this side of the screen, the virtual audience will see your face instead of your back.
Okay, thank you so
That
much.
would be so nice for them.
Yeah, I like hiding from this, so that's why that's fun.
But you're so visual here.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so let's move to the next part. So in the next several slides, we're going to have a brief overview about the UTRAX reports on Data Gateway. If you go to the Data Gateway and navigate to the UTRAX overview, you probably can see something similar to the screenshot on my presentation. There are at least 3 links can lead you to the UTRAX report page. So just to choose whatever your favorite and you'll be there. Next slide, please. Okay, here is the UTRAX reports, how it looks like when you click your favorite link. There are different reports listed under the different finalization submission period. And also there are some, year-round reports that you can use all the year. Next slide, please. Okay, here are some details about the instruction of using those reports. The reports listed under the October, December, and the year end are customized to use business rules and show you the relevant data items for that specific finalized submission period. So those reports based on live data. So that means the reports get updated with each submission. Some of the reports are useful year-round, even though they, not just the period they're listed under. There's another section of the reports that you may want to pay attention to is the archive report section. So those reports will reflect the data that was in the finalized data set for that submission period. These reports may not be available until many months after the end of the finalized deadline. So please download them right after you finalize your data in a specific submission period, because you wouldn't, access to them until long time later. So if you want to use them to check some data that you finalized, or you want to provide the data file to auditors, that would be super neat. And okay, go ahead.
I have a comment that I want to make too. I just wanted to make a comment that we also found with the archived reports, me and David have worked with IT over and over, and there are times when that report doesn't match exactly to the exact counts you finalized in your finalized data. And so that's another good reason why if you download them the day you finalize, that's an exact receipt of your counts. And it's not that the data in the finalized database changes, but for whatever reason, when they create those reports after the fact, there are times when they can be a little bit off. Not much, but.
Thank you, Callista. Okay, so year-round reports. These reports should be used year-round for tracking important data items. There's one report, which is the graduation rate reports. That's not get updates daily or with each data submission. It gets updated like 3 times a year, right after each UTREX finalized submission, October, December, and year end. Okay, any questions? All right, next slide, please. Okay, so many of the reports have the options for you to download them as PDFs, CSV, and sometimes Excel. So you should download PDFs for the copies that you will archive and you will provide to the auditors. The CSV and Excel files are great for filtering and sorting student data as you review data for accuracy. And some PDFs have aggregates only, others have a mix of student data and the school LEA totals. The CSV and Excel files usually have student level data and often included a field that indicates if the record is in the totals or not. Next slide. Okay, I think that's the end of my presentation, so I'll give it to Callista.
All right, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So for many of you, this is probably nothing new, but we do get quite a bit of turnover, and so that's why we like to still go over this. It's also a good reminder for those that have been doing this for a while. But for those that are aware and are not aware, we just want to emphasize that in UTREX, it is expected that LEAs are submitting daily collections. There are occasional technical difficulties, like at the beginning of the school year, getting everything working again after the summer. But for the most part, it should be expected that your SIS is communicating to UTREX daily. There's links to board rule in there, so I won't go over that. We will, at the beginning of the school year and as we head into year end, start paying pretty close attention to LEA submissions and those time and date stamps. We often will reach out to you if we notice that at the beginning of the school year, you don't have a daily collection just automatically set up. You can manually submit to UTREX, but we will reach out to you to encourage you to set up that automatic submission. And then at year end, we will also reach out if we notice that you haven't submitted, in a week or so. And the reason for that is because that's considered stale data. For us, when we're trying to help you get ready for year end, it's not helpful to you if we review data that's like a week old. And so the purpose of having that daily data submission is just so that we can get the most recent counts, because maybe you had fatal errors last week and then now they're cleared. So we just want to be able to see the most recent data. The other reason is Stephanie and Riley have talked about all of those reports that link to live UTREX data. If your data isn't pulling through daily, then those reports are not as accurate or useful. All right, next slide. Just a review that we have 3 times a year when LEAs are asked to finalize one of those daily collections. And I'll go over those dates a little bit later. Can you go to the previous slide and make sure I didn't skip that? I'm kind of just talking without reading all the bullet points as I go, but make sure that okay, yeah, I do actually want to go over this. So the 3 deadlines are October 5th. That's important because that changed in the last year. It used to be the 7th for every finalized deadline, but last year, as many of you know, the legislator moved up the CDC deadline, which made all of our teams have to move up everything. And then we had a compromise with you all at this data conference last year to move that October 1 date to October 5th. So that is now the deadline, unless those calendar dates fall on a weekend or a holiday, and then it would just be the next business day. And then it's always by 5 p.m. on that date. That's also in board rule if you want to reference that. And then I will just note, there's a specific window of time in December and year end. You'll notice we took out October. That is because part of the compromise for that October 5th date was that there are no extensions, no matter what the reason is. And so in October, as of right now, we cannot correct any data that is finalized. If you do notice an error in your finalized data, this is applying to December year end, please contact one of us immediately. Usually we can get the finalizer reopened for you, get that resubmitted. We prefer to do it that way than to wait weeks and have to do manual changes to the database. So it's actually better if you notice a significant error that would affect funding or some of your big counts. It's better that you contact us immediately, even if it's after that deadline. We would prefer to get it fixed before we roll everything over, especially at year end. And then just a reminder that if you are the person that has the power in Data Gateway, your data collector, to press the finalize button, to make sure that you are available a few days after that date. So in other words, don't go out of the country on July 8th, if possible, just because we do, even if you don't find those errors, we are looking for errors and we will contact you. And in many of those cases, we will ask you to refinalize. And we bring this up because we have had LEAs that we've had to contact and they were out of the country and having to do it on their cell phone. And that's just hard for you and it's hard for us. So we want to make sure that Again, those situations are, rare, but we want to make sure that someone is available in case, we need to get in touch with you, and that may be after the finalized deadline. And then the actual button usually opens a week or so in advance of that date. At year end though, it's at least 2 weeks. All right, next slide. Okay, so now we talked about like the deadlines. How do you know though when you're actually ready to finalize? At year end, it can be challenging because the school year ends in May and then the deadline is not till July. So you have time, but sometimes people in your buildings leave for the summer, or sometimes having more time, it can actually, I don't know, sometimes that can be a negative thing because you keep working on things so much to the point that how do you know when you can actually press the button? So this is just some helpful tips to know when you can press that button. You never need to ask us if it's okay. We always have LEAs reaching out. We don't need to give you permission. It's your data and it's basically your stamp of approval when you finalize that. If there are, like I said, significant errors that affect funding or reporting, we will look for those and contact you. But for the most part, little things, you are certifying that that's accurate. And so what you finalize is what is used. So it is important and we want it to be right, but we also don't want you to feel afraid to press that button. We want you to feel like you're confident and ready to get it done, especially early. I'm sure many of you have been in that situation where it's 4 p.m. on the date of the deadline and it gets stressful. We're usually on the phone and email reaching out, and usually the last few LEAs, they're having pretty big technical issues or SIS problems. UTREX is very slow that last day. People that are putting in manual submissions will sometimes have to wait over an hour to see the timestamp update. So if you've been in that situation, you know and understand that if possible, doing it earlier is just recommended. We understand that sometimes there's reasons why you have to wait, but especially in July, since you will have a few weeks where that window is open to press the finalize button, I would recommend getting it done earlier than later, again, where possible. I understand, like Jordan School District, for example, they have schools that don't even get out until close to that deadline. So there are reasons why we have the 7th picked, but for all other LEAs that can finalize early, we would recommend that you do that. You can always refinalize, so that's nice to know. You can get a submission in and then keep making updates up until the deadline. The button will not reappear until you do a new submission, but you can refinalize as many times as you need to up until that deadline. Okay, I'll just answer that. So the exam and data file, for those that are still trying, and I'm glad that you are, you'll you'll sign into Data Gateway, the UTREX overview screen, which should show your LEA's data collection, and then the exam and data file is it'll say exam and data, and there's a little file icon. It's pretty small, and then you just click on that icon. Okay, another thing I just want to point out, and I bring it up just because we do have this happen every submission, every school year, where we're reaching out to LEAs that have finalized I don't want to say the wrong submission, but it's not the submission they intended to finalize. And what I mean by that is the time and date stamps don't line up what they finalized with what they've most recently submitted. And so the reason for that tends to be that you're doing lots of manual submissions. Sometimes it's on the last day, sometimes it's on the last week, whatever it is. And because everybody is submitting, the system is slow. And so if you press that button before the submission has processed in UTrex, so it may show on your end that everything looks good, but if it hasn't actually completed and processed in UTrex, and you press the finalize button, it's going to finalize whatever was in UTrex most recently. So it won't be that submission that you just did. The reason that's important is because you could have had a fatal error that you fixed. And so when you did the work to fix it and you did a new submission, if you finalize and you didn't wait for that submission, you're finalizing the fatal error. And so that student wouldn't be included. So just make sure that you're patient. You've just seen an example of how our system is slow, and that overview screen can be painful at times. So please just know that sometimes the best thing to do is walk away, come back and make sure everything lines up. Yes.
Previous years, you have like, you kind of mentioned kind of a deadline for historical records updates to get them in before, like a couple weeks in
Yes.
advance.
Mhm. Go ahead, is there more to that? Okay, that's the question, okay. So historical updates, which I believe I'll have somewhere later on here, but, that's a good question. Thank you for bringing it up. They're always due 2 weeks prior to whatever the finalized date is. So 2 weeks prior. And that's for October year end or December.
But is there a limit on the S1X records? Can we put in S1X records all?
You can do S1X record updates up until the moment you finalize. And the nice thing about that is you're not relying on us to get those historical updates done. So that's why if you put in a historical update that can be done with an S1X, we'll decline it just for that reason, that it's easier. It doesn't take all the manual work on us. You can just do it on your SIS and then do your submission. Historical updates take time. That's why there's that 2-week buffer. I will say you can continue to put in historical updates even after the deadline has passed. We always do our best to accommodate and get those done, especially where they're for students with level 2 fatal errors. We don't want those students to be blocked. We ask that you try to hit that deadline, but we will do our best to still get them done. It's better to submit the request than to just be like, darn, I missed the deadline and not submit it. All right, so I will say that 2-week deadline, what we say is it's a 2-week deadline for a guaranteed completion. All right, and then as always, please use the courtesy data review and the trainings that we do like this and that we'll do in May, as well as your UTrex reports as you are reviewing your data. Those are meant to help you. That's what we use. And so we would just ask that you look at those thoroughly. One note I will say that's not on here. So our next LEA data meeting for May is going to be on May 22nd. So it's the normal Thursday, 1:30 time. That will be when we talk all about the year-end training. And so I know that seems quickly, and even for me this morning when I was looking at that date, I thought, oh, that scares me, that's so close. So please start thinking about year-end because it is closer than maybe we want to admit. All right, next slide. So I kind of talked about this, but we will send a courtesy data review letter to every LEA. What some LEAs request it from us, which basically that will just prioritize you sooner. If you send us an email and say, hey, I want a courtesy data review done, we'll try to get that done that day if we're in the window of doing those reviews. If it's before when we've started, we'll try to prioritize doing your LEA first. Otherwise, we've done it differently over the years. We've done charter schools first and then districts. We've I think last year we did, we looked at everyone's end date for their last day of school, and we tried to do it in order of when you ended school. So we tend to follow an order of how we do those. We do the courtesy data reviews. We try to knock them out in 1 week. Sometimes that overlaps into a second week. We haven't nailed down a date yet for this year. The LEA data meeting is on May 22nd. Historically, we have started the data reviews that following Monday, but this year that's Memorial Day. I will just ask, I guess, for some feedback, with no promises, but is there any requests? Is it better for us to do those reviews, earlier than that LEA data meeting training, or is end of May good for you? Before anyone responds, I will say one negative thing that we learned from doing them earlier is that if we review your validations before your last day of school, it's not going to capture anything that triggers after we do the review. So that's one downfall. But if you're already paying attention to that, maybe you're not caring. So does anyone have a preference, or has our timeline been working for you with when we do those data reviews? Oh, good. Okay, we got a thumbs up. And I guess if there's anyone that's like, I want it earlier, you can reach out to me directly, and we can look at doing that. It looks online, it's been working. Okay, so I would expect this year that it would be that end of May around Memorial Day time. With that, you want to make sure that you pay attention to email at the end of the school year, also where there's a holiday, because we do send those via email, and I always get LEAs to ask, hey, you never sent the review, and then it ends up being that we sent it and they just missed it in an email. So just make sure you're looking for that. It will come from one of the data and statistics team members. We usually send 2 attachments. It'll have a letter and then a PDF of your school summary report. One note on the school summary report is that if you email us like 2 weeks after we've reviewed your data, just know that that school summary, it's not static, it changes daily. So the one we attached is going to be the day that we reviewed your data. So it might not match. When you email in with questions, like your counts could have changed as of the day you're emailing. So when we send it out, that's as of the day we've reviewed. And then this is just always relevant. Please make sure we have your current contacts for where we send those reviews. We recognize and thank you to everyone that reaches out to me with people that need to be added to the list or taken off the list. We really appreciate that, and it's more helpful for us and you if we're sending it to someone that actually is working. And so if that has changed since December, please make sure to let us know before year end, if we need to be emailing somebody else. All right, next slide. Here's just an example for those that have not seen this before. It's a Word document. The way that we format it is the top bullet point section are what we call must respond items. We have a set list of things that we're looking at. We pull your data as of that day from live UTREX, and we compare it to last year end. And so we make those comparisons, but there's some things that are pretty blatant that we can tell are most likely wrong. We tend to include those in the top section, as well as fatal errors that need to be cleared, other things that would be significant for funding, or any of your really high stake data that we feel probably needs to be looked at. We ask that you respond to those, we ask that you review those items, fix anything that needs to be fixed, and then let us know, yeah, we fixed that, or if for some reason, you've reviewed it and you think, and that is right, we would like to know that. That way, when we finalize, we're not still saying, hey, we think you did this wrong. Then we'll know and we'll make a note of it. No, that's what their count is this year. And there's always a good reason for that usually. The bottom section are things that we still want you to review. They're still important. They could or could not be wrong. But they're not things that you need to respond to us about. They're not things that will necessarily affect your funding. But we still want your data to be accurate, so please still review those things. For example, your warnings do not block student records, but we still want you to review them. It looks like there's a question, is it possible that I missed it? What does it say?
Is it possible to add a feature to the checkbox or something that says verified, so we don't get overwhelmed with warnings?
Oh, well, that would be, I know Cliff's in the back. Well, Cliff, this is just a, I guess a request, an enhancement. If we could add something on the overview, for the warning validation, basically when an LEA has verified that, hey, I've looked at those are fine. Is there a way to check something and make those go away?
Maybe not go away, but we can consider marking them in a way that potentially is visible, seen on the page.
Okay.
That this is like,
Okay, that would be really helpful.
Can you
Virtual audience.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, repeat
So
that.
Cliff said that, his team, they probably can't make them go away. But they can look at an option, like a checkbox or something that if they've been read and verified, that they would appear, differently than the new warnings that had not been verified. And it looks like people are in support of that. All right. And thank you for that. We do appreciate any feedback. We can't always accommodate every request, but it's good to have things like that so we can bring to our IT team and make it better for you. All right, next slide. Okay, I'm not gonna go over every single point for October and December, but just know when we send out these slides, these are those top letter items that I was talking about, which affect funding and important reporting. These items change from submission to submission, and so that's why we have a list for October, a list for December, and a list for year end. So I'm not gonna go over October and December just because you can read those on your own time. So we can skip through that. But year end is coming up, and so I will go over these. Also remember that in May, we will extensively go over these. So I'll just read them today, but in the May meeting, we will go over each of these and explain what you should be looking at, why they're important. So as always, fatal errors and warnings. For year end, your enrollment count at the school and district level and membership need to be accurate. The reading on grade level and early numeracy data, that's both the interventions, or we have those separated out actually. So that's those statuses for beginning of year, mid-year, and end of year. And then the interventions, which are fatal errors, and again, those won't trigger until the last day of school. Kindergarten type codes has become a very important data point. It's always been there, but now it is tied to funding, whether or not a student is half day or full day. And I should say tied to different amounts of funding. And so that's really important that those are accurate. Incident data needs to be correct at year end. The SCRAM extended school year count, those need to be accurate. There's a separate report for reviewing that. Also, early graduates, as well as all graduation data, there is a caveat to this. You will have through the following October to make updates to graduation data. However, at year end, do the best that you can to get all those exit codes and completion status codes correct. That way you're not having to go back and do historical updates or S1Xs. And then all of your course data, credits, attended credits, and then course grades. All right, next slide. Okay, Okay, again, we will meet on May 22nd for all of that year-end stuff, and now I get to turn the time over to
maintains and updates the stuff on her behalf. Next slide, please. Okay, so the presentation is going to include a general overview of the UTREC specifications, the document layout, and then some document navigation tips because it is a humongous document, 200 something pages. Next slide, please. Okay, so first of all, where to find it. So from the USBE homepage, you'll see a link you'll see a bunch of drop-down menus, and one of them is sections. Under there, you can navigate to the information technology section of our website. And the screenshot on the left is what the welcome page for the information technology section looks like. And each of our web pages, for the most part, have a bunch of tabs. So first you have to click on the correct tab, which is going to be the Utah State Board of Education Applications tab. And then look all the way to the very bottom of the page and you'll find the link for UTREX. Utah e-transcript and record exchange is what UTREX stands for, in case anyone wasn't aware. And then the screenshot on the right is what the UTREX, the first page that it opens to, looks like, which happens to be the tab that you're going to want to be on, which is the Guidelines and Specifications tab. And I actually recommend bookmarking this page right here, rather than bookmarking specifically the specifications, because this page, in addition to having the link to the specifications, also has links to guidance documents for each of the submission periods, October, December, and year end. And that includes the important data items to review, as well as the deadlines and then some of the board rules behind the requirements for that and things like that. So on this page, if you scroll down, you'll find the link for UTREX Data Clearinghouse specifications, and it lists the year that the specifications are currently current for. And so actually that link for the specifications doesn't change even whenever we change it to a different year's document. So you could just bookmark the link for the specifications and you'll have that. You'll be, anytime you click on it, you'll have the most current version of the specifications. I don't recommend downloading a copy of the specifications and just saving that on your computer, because you might end up referring to an older version of the specifications without realizing that there's a new version available. Next slide, please. Okay, so which brings me nicely to the next topic, the update schedule. So the specifications get updated twice yearly, usually kind of in the January timeframe, and then again in the summer. And this year we're expecting the specifications update to occur in August. Since it's not, we do have updates that we let people know about in these meetings throughout the year. So you want to attend these meetings regularly to know about upcoming changes sooner than you would know about them if you're purely relying on the specifications. Next slide, please. And next slide. Okay, so when you click into the document, it's good to just start with the table of contents. These are clickable links that'll bring you to the various sections within the specifications. 224 pages is the start of the last section of that. So yeah, it's a huge document. So if you were to just try to scroll through there to find what you're looking for, you're gonna be scrolling forever potentially. So it's nice that these are actually clickable links. And for the most part, these are the way UTREX, the data is collected as a series of different records. And then the last three at the bottom are some just miscellaneous information here. the level 2 validations, a table of language codes, and then a full revisions history that goes back to 2016. Next slide, please. So when you click on one of those links for one of the types of records, that each type of record has 3 different sections. So you'll start out with the SIF mapping information, and that's what your SIS developers need in order to set up the SIS system submission to SIF. The next section is the detailed field descriptions. And those give brief descriptions of the fields and any codes or values, and then sometimes notes or rules for that field. And the notes, what we try to do with those is when we get frequently asked questions, that the notes are kind of the answers to frequently asked questions a lot of the time. So in my opinion, that's the most valuable part of the UTRAC specifications for just your average user within your LEA. Registrars, special ed directors, you know, people who might otherwise be intimidated by this document. If you can present this document to them in a way that it helps reduce the intimidation of how to approach using it, this could be a really valuable resource for them. And then the final section for each type of record is gonna list the validations on that record. And it gives you an overview of you know, basic validation requirements for that field. Is it a required field? Does it have a limited set of valid values that are allowed? And then for each validation, is it a fatal validation? Will it block records, or is it just a warning? Next slide, please. Okay, so I've broken out the tips into a couple different slides. The first slide is for data managers and SIS developers. You're gonna wanna be able to look at all 3 sections for each chapter, each record type, and be able to consume that information. So in addition to clicking on the table of contents links to get directly to the record that you're looking for information on, Control F, which is to bring up the find, the search functionality, that is gonna be your best friend. Although to an extent, it kind of requires that you know the correct terminology to search for. So there's a mix of actually taking the time to actually go through the whole document at some point, to really understand the fields and the names and the terminology in that document. But once you've gone through that once, hopefully in future uses of the document, you already have an idea in your head of what kind of term you can search for to get directly to the thing you're looking for. And as you go through it, if you notice red text, that's a new thing, an update to the specification. And if you see strike through, that's something that we're removing from the specification. At the start of the document, there's going to be a recent revision section, which summarizes the things that have changed in this half a year update to the specifications. And usually in that recent revision section, we try to include links to the part of the specifications where the actual revision is made. So like if it's a new validation error that's added, there'll be a clickable link on the error code in that recent revision section. And then we have the full revisions history at the end of the document that goes all the way back to 2016. So if there's something, you missed something, and then you realize, oh shoot, something changed and I missed it, you can look through there and try to figure out what exactly the change was and when it happened. Okay, so this slide is kind of the tips more for your registrars, your program staff. I personally do this training to the new special ed directors once a year to try to introduce this document to them in a way that hopefully they will feel comfortable using it. And one of the main things is just don't be intimidated by the programming language in there. Just ignore it. Skip right past that zip mapping section. Go straight to the detailed field descriptions. using the Control F key if they know what term to search for, or reaching out to someone for help for what term to search for if they're not really sure. Next slide, please. Okay, and then finally, tips on the validations. So we have the level 1 validations are listed at the end of each record section. And then the level 2 validations are at the very end of the document. And they're labeled, the section is titled level 2 exceptions. So if you're searching level 2 validations, it's not gonna come up. So it's kind of weird that we call it exceptions in the specifications rather than level 2 validations. But that's your tip for how to find that. And so for the level 1 validations, they all have like, if it's the S1 record, the student record, the validation is S1 dot and then the error ID number, right? The level 2 validations don't follow that same pattern as far as having an error ID. I know that with 17 is one of the error IDs for a level 2 validation. The level 2 validations are kind of more known by the actual name of the validation rather than the validation number. So dual SCRAM validation, dual kindergarten validation, things like that. But there's not very many level 2 validations, so it's really not that big of a deal to just go to that section and look through all of them. Whereas with the level 1 validations, there are a lot of them. So for that one, it's really nice to first download your validations file and look at the ID number of the validation that you need more information on, and then search for that ID number within the specifications to try to get more information about it. And then the main parts to pay attention about the validation are exactly which field is being validated, or in some cases, it's a combination of more than one field. And then what's the rule that it's checking on? So some common rules are if it's a required field, or if there's only certain values that are allowed, or if there's dependencies. So for example, if there's a special ed exit code, you also have to have a special ed exit date. So those two fields there's a dependency in the validation. Next slide, please. Okay, and if you have questions about the specification, or if you think something needs more clarification, anything and everything UTREC specifications, this is your contact person, Melissa Preziosi, and she prefers email, but you can call her as well. Any questions before I turn it over to Wynn? Or Megan? Megan's
Hi, everybody. I'm Megan. I don't usually do the UTEX presentation, so probably a lot of you don't know who I am. I am on the data statistics team. I usually work more with our accountability data side of this, but I'm happy to be here. We're gonna do a quick presentation on data literacy. This is something we put together as a group for USBE, and we thought that you guys might also be interested in seeing what we put together as far as this goes. Okay, so the goals of this training are to define data literacy, to understand USB data. You guys are unique, you spend a lot of time with USB data, but we're going to go over that a little bit. And then also interpreting and using data here. Next slide. Okay, so first off, we want to give you a little tutorial, I guess. That's not the word I want actually. Scenario, thank you, Stephanie. Take a look here and in your head, maybe make notes of how you would interpret this scenario. We're gonna come back to it at the end of the presentation, but just take a few minutes to sort of put some ideas together here. You guys good? Can we move on? Cool. So, for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to define data literacy as the ability to accurately understand, communicate, and use data to make informed decisions. And one of the things, the goals of this training was to make sure we're emphasizing the culture of data literacy within USBE and within our LEAs. So as you can see, we have a couple examples. We'll go through a couple of what happens when you don't have a culture of data literacy. So we get poor decision making, reduced efficiency, missed opportunities and risk of errors are big ones. And then when we have a culture of data literacy, we are better at making data informed decisions. We have improved outcomes. Our communication is more effective between USBE, our different departments and LEAs. And then we get increased curiosity as well. Some of the essential competencies of data literacy are being able to analyze and interpret data, to visualize data so that, you know, wider audiences can understand what your analysis is, how to read data, database decision making. We hear about that all the time. And then the ethical use of data. What are limitations to the data that we have, and what can we say with the data we have, and what can we not say with the data we have? Thanks. I'm going to hand it over to David. He's going to talk a little bit about USB's data.
Okay, next slide. So this is just, I'm just gonna give you a quick broad overview of what kind of data we have. Pretty straightforward. Everything from student level data with demographics to assessment data, educators. I don't read the entire slide for you. You can see what it says, but this is just to give you an idea of what we have. This gives a few examples of things that each of those boxes represent. And next slide. Okay. Guess it's
Okay. I'm Kristen Campbell, and Wynn and Stephanie are we're gonna talk about interpreting and using data, or not using it incorrectly and getting on the news. Next slide. The purpose of this is how to draw meaningful conclusions, to avoid incorrect conclusions, and how to recognize the difference between descriptive and inferential statistics. Okay, we receive data on varied submissions schedules, and our reported data is only as good as what is reported. Human error, you know, people hit a 6 instead of a 9, and all of a sudden stuff is off. There's also a lack of clear definitions. We have different SISs, and some fields lack effective constraints. For an example is absenteeism. Some schools are like, you miss 1 second of the day, you are absent. And other schools, you have to be gone on all day to be considered absent. And so when we try to work with that data, it gets very messy. Next slide. Limitations of our available data, the data structure doesn't always accommodate what's going on in the real world. We're trying to make it a 1 or a 2, and it may not fall into that. Our data changes in time. We have changes in legislation or rule, our vendors change. We have all sorts of things. And the type of data we can collect is limited. A few years ago, I don't know if any of you remember this, on the KEEP, they asked for preschool, the name of the preschool. We had over 17,000 preschool names come in. So it made it, and a lot of them were the same. Instead of like Jewish Community Center, someone had put JCC, and so it ended up almost being non-usable. Next slide. The limitations of educational research. Datafication turns our aspects of life into data that can be analyzed, and that's hard to do because people are different. Statistics are best and abstract of reality, and experimental design is less accessible in education. We can't decide, well, these kids get this and these kids don't, because we get into trouble. Next slide. limitations of education research at USBE. We use different business rules for different reasons, and the result can end up being different. I'm gonna give an example of that just happened to me that I'm gonna talk about later in the day. Packets are a huge thing right now at the legislature, and they want us to collect data on it. So how can we collect data on something we don't collect data on? Well, one thing we looked at graduates last year and said, how many of them had general financial literacy on their schedule? And about 28% did not have the course, which means maybe they took a packet, maybe they took it someplace else, and it was put on their transcript. This is data we just have to kind of guess at. But we ended up, when we did that, we went from 45,000 on graduates down to 40 because we had to keep people who were only in there 4 years to make sure, we were doing it. So this is stuff that different business rules for different things. Interpretation should be grounded in a broader understanding. Lynn's gonna go into that because he's much smarter than me. And we most often use descriptive statistics. Like I just said, 25% of our kids didn't take GFL. We're supposed to. So.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, so maybe think about this graphic as a hierarchy of determining effectiveness. If you think about a program you implement or something and you want to understand if it works, we're placing descriptive statistics as the foundation of that hierarchy, and we're putting at the top cause and effect. You might think about that as kind of the gold standard for determining if something's effective, right? Did the thing I did cause the effect I want? We're going to talk about these levels in a little bit more detail as we go forward. Take the next slide. So let's start with descriptive statistics. Like we mentioned, it forms the foundation. Also, if you think about it, descriptive statistics are the most common statistics you see. It's certainly the most common statistics we calculate at the USBE. Would that be true in your districts as well? Yeah, so we see these a lot. So it makes them particularly important. Over the years, I've been surprised how, not only how important they are, even how easily they are to confuse or mess up. Calculating percents, the way you count things, you can make some real errors with descriptive statistics. So they're an important foundation. They help us understand what we could do with inferential statistics based on our calculations made at the descriptive level. So consider the things you can do. Things like summarizing data, frequency counts, looking at the variability in those data, and calculating things like central tendencies. It's also important to remember the things that you shouldn't be doing or cannot do with descriptive statistics. Things like inferring cause and effect, or making broad generalizations, or testing hypotheses. I'll take the next slide. All right, so I want to pause on this one as we start to transition from descriptive statistics to talk just a little bit about inferential statistics. And that's to recognize that, they often share methods. So whether you're making predictions or trying to test relationships or determining cause and effect, there's going to be some overlap on methods. There's not a discrete difference always between that. But one thing you can do with inferential statistics are things like account for covariance, test for group differences. All of these types of inferential statistics have their own sets of assumptions that have to be met. So once we start stepping away from descriptives to inferential statistics, there might be a lot more detail of things that we need to consider as we start to look forward to reaching conclusions and trying to make statements about what we found. So this is where we get into hypothesis testing a little bit. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so let's start at the top. We're talking about cause and effect as the gold standard, if you will. So consider randomized control trials. Kristen mentioned to you that we don't see a lot of experiments in education. That's ethical reasons is largely why. Who can say it's okay for one group to get a treatment and another to be in the control? Funding is also an issue for that. They take a lot to implement. So often what we do is lean on quasi-experimental designs. Something we do at the USBE often when we're trying to understand cause and effect, we can use an RCT, we're gonna do something like, once it's done, we'll take the treatment group and match them statistically to a similar control group and do our group comparisons that way. Other examples might be things like fixed effects models or regression discontinuity. Stepping away from there, if the data are structured such, or the theory is such that cause and effect isn't realistic and you can't use an experiment, and you can't be quasi-experimental, you might be thinking about making predictions and understanding relationships. These are often regression-based approaches. We're interested in the relationships between X and Y. So you've heard people say that a relationship doesn't infer cause. So we're being very careful at this step to make sure that we understand these relationships and make good predictions. We're also interested in the direction of those relationships and the strength of them and the amount of variance that a given model might explain. All right, next slide. I'll leave you with just a few parting shots to consider when you're using data and making interpretations. Consider that, and I'm sure y'all are very well aware of the importance of keeping data well organized. It should be interpreted within a context. So there's a policy context, there's a theoretical context, there's a political context, there's a human element to the data that we look at. And it's important to consider those things in context when you start thinking about your results and reaching conclusions from them. So the method should align with the theory and the research questions. And when we write things up, we try to avoid hyperbole and strong sentiments and emotions and stick to just what we can actually see to be clear in the data that we're looking at. So you should always be following best practices. You should know your own lens and bias and carefully consider the caveats and limitations of both the data that you're working with. You know, Kristen talked about data is only good in our analysis of the data we receive. So you need to consider those limitations and also the limitations that might be part of the analysis that you choose or the methods that you're employing. All right, thanks. I think Dr. Stephanie Sue is going to revisit the scenario.
Thank you, Wen. So at the beginning of this presentation, Megan asked us to think about a scenario, how to interpret, by the data it provides to us. So now Fanny is back and let's take a closer look. So in this scenario, we're looking at two student groups of third graders, Group A and Group B. So in Group A, the students were introduced to a math tutoring program, while the Group B students stayed in the regular classroom and didn't participate in this math tutoring program. So at the end of this semester, we found the average grade math score for the Group A was 302. While the Group B score was 291. So what does this mean? How should we interpret these results? So in the next several slides, we're going to break it down and talk it through. Next slide, please. So here we go. Here is an example of incorrect data interpretation. I'm going to read this passage. While I'm reading it, please try to find out the mistakes were made for the data interpretation. We'll see how many of them we can find. We are excited to find this highly successful math tutoring program clearly leads to higher RISE math scores because the program participants' average score was higher than the non-participants' average score. We can implement such tutoring programs at all grade levels to increase math scores, which is important for the future workforce of Utah. So actually, we have already highlighted the mistakes were made for this data interpretation. It starts with, we are excited. So this is very objective, and this reflects emotion and bias. A good data interpretation should stay neutral and stick to the fact. And the second problem is calling the math tutoring program highly successful is very problematic because you didn't explain, at this situation, didn't explain why and how it's successful, without any context or evidence to back it up. And last but not the least, oh no, there is another one. So, they're saying, clearly leads to higher rise math scores. This is problematic too, because this indicates a causal relationship between the math tutoring program and the differences in scores. But is there really in reality? No one knows, because other factors may play a role that we haven't accounted for. The last problem, but not the least, is saying important for the future workforce of Utah. So this is a big leap. It has generalized your conclusion to a way broad population with a long-term impact, without any context or evidence to support it. So those are the common mistakes people usually make on interpreting data results. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, go back. I think I skipped something. Okay, so let's move to the bar chart. So this bar chart is showing you visually about the differences between the two scores of the two student groups. So there are some problems too, as you may notice. One problem is there's no y-axis label. Without a y-axis label, we don't know what is, trying to tell us about the scenario and the scores. And also, if you see, there is a truncated y-axis. It starts at 285, not 0. So this may make the differences in scores look much bigger than it really is. So this will mislead our audience about the data results. Okay, I think we are ready to go next slide. All right, so here's the example of correct data interpretation. So in this passage, we have already addressed all the issues we talked about in the earlier slide. So this one starts by stating the fact of how the group A and the group B performed in that test. And then it also, saying that very carefully suggested that the math tutoring program might have contributed to the differences in scores. At the same time, it acknowledged that other factors may play a role. So that's very important. And then, if we want to establish a causal relationship between the math tutoring program and the better performance of students on the math test, further data analysis would be necessary to rule out other factors that might have influenced the scores. So now let's move to the bar chart. So this is the improved version of the bar chart. It's supposed to handle all the issues we talked about in the earlier bar chart. So in this one, we can see that now it has the y-axis label, and we can see the y-axis starting from 0 instead of some random number. So now you can see the differences between the scores of the two groups becomes smaller. So this really reflected the reality instead of being visually exaggerated. Another thing is you can notice that we have added 2 data labels for the bars. So this really helped the audience, you know, to understand and to get the information at a glance. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I think that's all for this presentation. Please let us know if you have any questions. If you have any questions offline, please feel free to email us through the datastats@schools.utah.gov. Thank you.
I think that's the end of this.
Yeah, that looks like it's dying. Feel free to copy, use, claim yourself as the author, I don't care. Make it look, you know, put your little spin on it, but these slides, again, this is what we're using to help train other staff at USB. It's like, hey, this is actually pretty important. So recommend that you guys take a look at that and use it. And if you can, please do. Okay, with that, thank you. Lunch till 1:30. 1. Okay, so 1. Thank you.
I told you.